Well, good. Let's get started. Good morning, everybody in New York City. Wow, this is so encouraging to see so many people get up early and take time on your Saturdays to help other people. I think I just want to start off by telling you that's the heart of Jesus Christ right there, is this heart to help another person. And if there's anything that I respect about his life is the way he reached out and met the needs of people that he was with. And so anyways, I want to just lift you up as I say that is the work we do in grief journey work is, I think it's the very work of the gospel. So welcome to the Grief Journey workshop. We're going to do some training today. And oh, my name's Tim, by the way, if you don't know. I got to see most of you on Wednesday night. And it was really encouraging to see so many people Wednesday night. Gosh, that was great. A lot of great comments, a lot of great questions. And isn't that the truth in grief? There's so much to learn and so many difficult questions to answer for people. And really what we do in grief is we don't get to answer all their questions. We get to walk alongside people is what we do. And that's the biggest need in the grief journey, is that another human would walk next to you in the worst times of your life. And so that's what we do in the grief journey. So I've got a 2-part workshop I want to do. I want to do one today, and then we meet again next Saturday morning, and we'll do another workshop. The one today is a bit of a review and a walking through the week by week process of the grief journey. So what I'm going to do is use some of the slides I used the other day, but I'm going to walk you through the book and kind of tell you what each group looks like when we meet. And so you become more familiarized with the process. Now, this is found in Appendix E in the back of the Grief Journey book. I've got an appendix that's labeled Leading a Grief Journey Group. So if you've got that, as a matter of fact, what I'm going to do right now, I'm going to put a couple of documents in the chat room, if that's okay. I'm going to put in a PDF of what I'm doing today. So let me do that first. There it is. So that's today, and I'll have these uploaded in just a moment. So we're doing that today, and then at the end of today, we'll have some Q&A. So be throwing your questions into the chat room as we talk today. And then next Saturday, I'm going to do a presentation on kind of the ins and outs of leading a group. In other words, you know, a grief journey group is pretty specific. It's pretty different than a Bible talk or a family group or going to church service. And so I do a whole lesson on kind of just, again, the ins and outs of doing these kind of groups. Some of the things to keep your eyes on, what to look for, that kind of a thing. And let me put, what else was I going to put? Oh, I was going to put in Appendix E. Let me do that. Let me just take a second here to find Appendix E. Grief journey. There it is. Okay. Okay, I just put 2 documents into the chat room. They should pop up pretty soon. But let me go ahead and share my screen. This is going to be a PowerPoint for the most part today. And again, let me remind you, okay, one document's in there, the other one's loading. Let me remind you of a couple things as I get started today, okay? First of all, remember that there are going to be some things today that may trigger you a bit, right? Some of you have suffered horrible losses, and you may be on a really good journey through those losses. And then things I say today might kind of like jump at you or poke you a little bit. So be careful for yourself, okay? If you need to get up and walk out for a little while, that's fine. But definitely after the workshop, if you need to talk to people, that kind of thing, that's very appropriate. So I just want to give you a heads up on that. The second thing I want to tell you today before we start is the grief journey is one approach to grief. It's a biblical approach that I use the scriptures, but it's not everything in grief. In other words, people that come to grief journey, I'd say about 90% of the people that come feel very resolved and they move forward very well. There are some people that come that have more needs. And for those people, we'll share at the end of the lesson tomorrow, next week, some of the different things they can do to get more help. So I'd say this process, it's very research-based, and it does help the vast majority of people that come to the groups. So let's go ahead and get started. There's my family. Okay, I'm going to put the class notes. I already put them in the chat room. And then if you did want to sign up for my weekly mental health blog, you can go to inmotioncounseling.org. And there's a place there, a button there to hit, and you can get probably about twice a month I send out a blog. You can do that. And then also remember to put questions in the chat room as we go along today. There's my mom and dad. I think I shared this the other night, but that's why I even wrote the book in the first place, was I lost my parents about 15 years ago now. And I dedicated the book to both of them. They were good people. Okay, now we talked about this at a church level on Wednesday night, but one of the reasons we do this, guys, is it is a ministry to help people. You know, you guys know that those of you that have gone through serious grief, that if you don't deal with your grief, it kind of comes after you, right? And maybe you know people in your church and in your community that grief is kind of pushing them around right now. And so one of the things we get to do is simply help people dive in to the grief issues in their life. And what we do is we interrupt this negative process that grief disciples us. And we even do a whole week on your history of grief, which I'll talk about in a little bit, and how much grief can change our lives without us even knowing it. So that's why we do this kind of thing. Now, let me also say this about the grief journey groups. The traditional grief journey group is 8 to 10 people in a circle. You know, we normally meet like Sundays before church or Sundays after church, but these can be done in people's homes. They can be done in a community center. By the way, these are great. This is a great outreach to non-Christians. But the grief journey can also be done individually by a person buying the book, or it can be done in pairs. You could do this in a Bible talk setting. There's just all sorts of different ways. When I wrote the book, I wrote it in such a way that it could be very useful in different settings. But the setting I'm going to be talking about mostly is a group setting. So we're talking about, like I said, 8 people's 8 people's kind of like the optimal, I think. 8 people plus the facilitator. We help people resolve issues. You know what? We teach people vulnerability, and maybe that's one of the most important lessons that people learn when they go through their grief, is they learn to be vulnerable. You know, grief has a way of just exposing us and, you know, exposing our humanity and the fact that we don't have it all together as humans, that we are underneath a supreme being who has, he has a different agenda for our lives than maybe we choose sometimes. And so we learn vulnerability. We also learn relationships. Guys, I think my work in the grief journey for the last, I've done this work for about 30 years now. I don't know if there's anything that's taught me more about relationships, or it's given me more of an ability to love people than working with people in grief. So as grief facilitators, you are going to get an opportunity to really grow in your ability to connect to people in unique ways. And what we call people that go through the grief journey, I always tell them this in the group. We tell every member that comes through, when you're done with this thing, you're going to be known as a pioneer of compassion. In other words, you're the kind of person now that can go into your church setting, you can go into your community, and you can have a dramatic impact on the lives of people because you've worked a very difficult area of your life out. And so we call them pioneers of compassion. And when you do this for many years, we've been doing it in the Denver church now for, gosh, probably 12 years now, 13 years. We've always run grief journey groups. You can begin to change a whole church. You know, when you have up to a third to a half of your members having gone through the grief journey like we have, And I'm not sure exact numbers, but they become people that are very compassionate, and that really changes the dynamics of the whole church. Okay, so what we do, and I'm going to start with week number 1. And I'll go over this later, but we announced to the church, hey, we're starting a grief journey group. It'll begin on this date. And I'll just tell people, come see me in fellowship. And basically the first 8 people that come up to see me, I do a quick little interview with them when they come up to see me. I just want to know who they lost. I want to make sure it's a good fit for them. But we have our first week. And in the first week, people read the introduction in chapter 1 of the book. So they read their chapter before they come to group. And so I actually send out on email, I've got a PDF of the introduction in chapter 1, and I send it out to people, and then I tell them they got to buy the book as well. And the first week when they come in, it's always a little nervous, right? People are a little bit tepid. Some people you can literally see a brother or sister drag them into group, like they barely made it kind of thing. But they come in, and obviously it's a little bit awkward. And I always start off, we start off with a prayer, and then I start off with a short devotional on the chapter that they just read. So I'm going to do that in just a moment. Typically during the week or in weekly meetings, I start off with a devotional. In this group, I start off with 2 different devotionals. I do one from the introduction. And so that first devotional is all about, and this is in Appendix E for you. The first little devotion I do, I just talk about time and space. I try to be very compassionate. I'm grateful that you guys are here today. We all never wanted to come to a group like this, but here we are. And I talk about time and space for the griever. And I tell people, in this group, we're going to give you time and we're going to give you some space to grieve. That's what we need. And I talk about that for just a few moments. And then I ask them this question as a group. It's a very easy question, but I just say, what kind of group guidelines should we have for this group? What are some of the things that should guide the way this group goes? Because I want them to come up with their own kind of rules for the group. And it's very important that I let them choose those rules. And here's what comes up. And if it doesn't come up, then I bring it up. But here's what comes up. There's about 3 or 4 that people are going to say. They're going to say, we should always, we should come to group and we should come to share. So I'm like, yeah, that's a great point. Please come to group. Obviously, if something really hard happens, you can't be here, you can't be here. But please, if at all possible, come to every of the 6 groups that we have. And I explain why why it's important to be here. And when you're here, we're not going to make you share, but obviously everybody shares. I don't know if I've ever had anybody just not share. So that's one rule. There's just attendance. The second one is, everybody always brings this up, is they'll say confidentiality is really important. And if they don't bring it up, then I definitely bring this one up. And I bring up the idea that there's reasons that we could never tell anybody who's coming to the group. So I'm not allowed to tell people that, for instance, Nicole's been coming to our grief group. She's awesome. You see, that's Nicole's information. That's what she owns. And if she wants to tell people, then she can certainly do that. But I can't, as a member of the group, tell anybody that Nicole's been attending Grief Journey. That's confidential. And then secondly, is we're never, ever, 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 ever allowed to tell people what somebody might say at group, even if it's really cool, even if it's something really good. So let's say Nicole's sharing and she shares something really good. I'm not allowed to ever say like, hey, Nicole's awesome, man. She shared this at grief group. Because again, she owns that part of her life. Now, if Nicole wants to share it, then she's welcome to do that. She can go, yeah, I'm coming to grief group and here's something I talked about. And it was really good. So we talk about confidentiality and how important it is. And people are always like, yep, that's good. And then the third thing we do, guys, and this one is one that some people don't feel very comfortable with, but we do it anyways, is we tell people there's no crosstalk in the group. And what crosstalk is, let's say I'm going to pick on Nicole again. Let's say Nicole's talking in the group. And Fiona says, "Oh, Nicole, that was great. Good. That was cool. Thank you for sharing that." Like, no, we don't have back and forth in the group, or we certainly never, ever, ever, ever correct somebody in the group. So we only allow people to simply share what they want to share. And then, as a facilitator, I might say, "Well, thank you very much, Nicole. I appreciate you sharing. Let's give Kevin a chance now to share." And we do that for a couple of reasons. Even if Nicole shared something really bad, like let's say Nicole said, "Yeah, I've been getting drunk every night this week because I'm just suffering so much of my pain." Well, Fiona's not allowed to say, "Hey, Nicole, you shouldn't be doing that." We don't let anybody, where there's no discipling, no mentoring. Now, as a facilitator of the group, I would probably touch base with Nicole after the group and say, "Hey, sister, you talked about getting drunk every night last week. How can I help you? How can I support you? How can I help you get on track?" I'm going to do that as facilitator after the group. But we never do stuff like that during the group. The reason is a couple reasons. One is everybody has a different grief journey, and me commenting on people, it's just not right, because we honor each person's individual grief journey. But secondly, if we have give and take all the time, then Fiona might watch that and go, "Oh, I don't know if I want to share honestly, because they're going to come back after me now." So Fiona might start shaping her sharing in a way so that she doesn't get like discipled or something. So we don't have any of that stuff, guys. We just allow people to do their own sharing, and that's it. Now, that doesn't mean it's not important. Maybe in another kind of group, if you're in a discipling group or Bible talk group, those are different environments and contexts. But in the grief journey, it's a very much honoring the individual for what they want to share. And what happens is when you do that with people and you give them this like freedom to just open their heart up, they will share what's on their heart. And I've heard people share things that they've never told anybody in their whole life in our grief group. Okay. And the reason they're able to do that is because we don't disciple in this group. We don't mentor people. And again, the only time we would do that is if it's really harmful behavior, or if somebody wants to harm themselves or harm another person. Those are times where we have to sit down and talk with them and figure out some ways of supporting them. So those are the three biggest basic rules. Everybody has some, other people might have some other ones, but basically those are the three biggies. So we do that in week number 1. And then I come back and I do a short devotional on chapter 1. And chapter 1 in the book is all about Jesus authentically engaging his grief. The title of it is Jesus Engages Grief, Will You? And in this chapter, we spend time talking about Jesus and Lazarus. And we talk about a couple points there, but the main point in this devotional that I give is what they've already read. The main point is Jesus authentically leaned into his pain. That Jesus, the thing we draw out of this is that Jesus, instead of standing on the sidelines, instead of, verbalizing a big sermon or something, Jesus walked into the drama of grief and he wept in front of people. That's my point. The Bible doesn't say Jesus cried, because remember, crying is something that I can control eventually. Like sometimes in grief group, even as a facilitator, I might cry especially when I read my introduction about my mom and dad, I might even cry. But when I cry, I can like pull it back together fairly quickly if I want to. That's not weeping though. Weeping is uncontrollable crying. So Jesus, in front of these people, he let it go. He wept. And these are the very people he was supposed to be helping, right? We're thinking, Jesus, get your act together. Come on, you got to be the Son of God here. Well, in this instance, he was the Son of Man. And he openly wept over the loss of his friend Lazarus. And I remind people that there's a myth going around our churches. I've heard it in Bible talks for 41 years now. And here's the myth: when people do Bible talks on Jesus weeping, they always say, but Jesus knew he was going to raise Lazarus from the dead, so it was okay. But that's not true. that would mean that Jesus was not authentic. That would mean he's kind of faking it. I believe Jesus authentically felt his loss of his best friend Lazarus, and he wept. And so that's what we do in this devotional, is we give people permission to be authentic. And I tell people, this is really important, guys. I want to write this one down. I tell people when somebody in the group is crying, we are not allowed to touch them at that time. We're just not. And there's a reason for that. The reason is when people are crying, that is God's way of processing hurt and pain. Our tears are God's invention and innovation to help us overcome pain. And so when we interrupt that with people and start patting them on the back, or we pat them on their shoulders, or we rub their knee or something, what we're doing is we're interrupting God's process. Now, when people are done crying or after group's over, please give them a hug. Please rub their shoulders. Please speak comforting words to them. You do it afterwards, okay? If you want to comfort people, we always do that after the group. But during the group time, we believe, or I believe, and I think research backs it up, that tears are a very important way that we process our hurts. And you guys know this to be true. After a good cry, you usually feel better, right? I happen to be kind of a crying kind of person, and so it's fairly easy for me to cry. But I almost always feel better after a good cry. So that's one thing that we kind of emphasize in week number 1, is let's let people have their own space to process their grief. Now, there are a few times in the last 30 years I've done this work, maybe just once, maybe twice, 2 or 3 times, that somebody would weep so much in front of the group that we call a timeout, just to give that person some dignity. Like, as a facilitator, if I feel like, this is going to take a while, then I just do a quick 5-minute timeout. Hey, everybody, let's take a 5-minute break. That gives that person a little dignity, gives her a chance or him a chance to kind of pull it together. I might go in there and assist a little bit, and then we move on. Okay, and then the final part of group number 1 is our discussion. And our discussion questions are in Appendix E, but basically the discussion questions are, tell us your name. Tell us why you came today. Like, who did you lose? Let us know one thing about that person that you lost, and let us know one thing you'd like to get out of this group. And people get real nervous. I have to repeat it a couple times. It'll come around to Fiona, and she'll be like, what were the questions again? So, but it's, what's your name? Why did you come today? Like, what do you want us to know about that person? And what's one thing you want to get out of a group? So I might say, hey, my name's Tim. I came today because my mom died a year ago. And one thing I'd like you guys to know about her is she was just part of the greatest generation. She was, nurturer, very funny person. She was really fun to be around. And then finally, I'd like to get rid of this pain. What I want to get out of group is getting rid of my pain, because it really hurts that she's gone. That'd be an example of people sharing. Okay, so that's group number 1. And then what I do, you guys, at every group from here on out, I do a couple things for people. One of the things I do when we go to group number 2 is I will always, at the beginning of the group, I remind people where we've been. So starting with week number 2, I always start the group out with, hey, last week, and I review what we did. And then at the end of each group, at the end of a group, I always tell people where we're heading to. So at the end of week number 1, I'll say, okay, this is it for week 1. Next week, you're going to read chapter 2 in the book, and we're going to talk about the heart of compassion that God has. So read your chapter, do your journaling. And then we meet for week number 2. The other thing I do in the middle of these is I send out an email. So this has been real helpful to people. I usually send the email out like the day after group, and I'll say, hey, Yesterday, I throw in some encouraging words. Yesterday, there was a lot of courage as people spoke about the reason they came to group. I might put a scripture on the email. And then I just say, here's where we're going this current week. We're going to do chapter 2 on Psalm 31. Get your books out, read them, journal the stuff, and then we'll see you next Sunday night or Sunday afternoon or whatever. Okay, so week number 2 comes around, and it's God's heart for the griever. It's a heart of compassion. And I start the group off, as I just mentioned. I say, last week we talked about Jesus engaging grief. Today we're going to talk about how God engages us. And I do a short devotional on chapter 2. Now, everybody's already read the chapter. They already know what I'm getting ready to talk about. I do maybe a 10-minute devotional. And I'm just there to highlight what they've already read. Okay, I'm kind of bringing it back up in their heart. And I just talk about the heart of God for the griever and how it's just an amazing, compassionate, comforting heart that God has. And I talk about why it's like that. We read a little bit of Psalm 31. You do it however you feel like you want to do it, but just the goal here is to draw out the heart of God. And I make a couple of really important points. I say, listen, one thing is, let's always run to God first instead of running to other people first. I said, people are amazing and helpful in our grief, but the first and foremost person I want you to run to is God himself. So I really emphasize that in our grief, there is parts of our grief, you guys, that people can't touch. Like, nobody could explain to me why my mom got lung cancer and she never smoked a day in her life. Nobody could tell me what that was all about, right? And if they tried to tell me, it was kind of offensive to me. So that's where I just needed God. Like, God, what's going on here? I need some help on this one. I don't know what you're up to. Why would my mom die of lung cancer when she never smoked? And so I tell people, like, God, there's some answers that God has that nobody else has for us, or there's answers he just doesn't give us. And so we emphasized during this week this idea that God is in charge. I talk about the mystery of God sometimes. Sometimes God's just a mystery. The Bible's very clear on this, by the way. He doesn't always tell us what he's up to, right? Was that song we sing at church, God moves in mysterious ways? I just remind people that, guys, I'm not going to try to pretend to explain to you why your loved one passed away when they did and the way they did. That's not my paycheck. So we talk about that in the group. And then the question for the discussion on this group, guys, is the hardest one that we do. The question is, what was it like for you on the day you found out your loved one passed away? Tell us your story. This is the one that people really struggle with because they have to go back and relive the day they found out their loved one passed away. And there's a reason I do that. There's a couple of reasons we do it. I think number one is it really bonds the group together. Like, we don't take in new members after this week, by the way. After week 2, there's no new members. Because in week 2, you're basically sharing the worst day of your life with people. And you're going to cry in front of people, and they're going to sit there and just love up on you, okay? So, and you get to tell a very intimate story about your life, and you get to connect it to the compassionate heart of God. That's the reason I put this one in week number 2, because I want people, when they share their story, to be thinking that God has got this thing. God's in charge here. I'm bearing my soul, but I'm doing it in front of people and in front of God. And I want people to walk home that week going, all right, it's me and God on this grief thing. And of course, we talk a lot about you with other people as well, but this week is all about God's compassionate heart for the griever. And I do remind people, and I'm going to say this, there's a myth in the ICOC that we're trying to get rid of. And if you've been around longer, for longer than 10, 12 years or whatever, the myth is this, that we're here to produce for God. That's the myth. That's the lie, is that our job is to produce for God. And so what people in grief often do is they have this idea that okay, I'm going to get through my grief, and then I can get back to being a disciple. And I hear that in different ways. They express it different ways. And I let people know, like, nope, that's a myth. You going through grief is being a disciple. You're being just like Jesus when you go through grief. And as a matter of fact, your weakness in grief is exactly what attracts other people to God. I am really firm about that, guys. Our weakness, that's why I love when visitors come to grief group, because when they see weak Christians, it's attractive to them. In the Apostle Paul wrote the books of 1st and 2nd Corinthians 12 different times. You know what Paul said about himself? He said, I am weak. 12 times. Paul made a big deal out of his weaknesses. And by the way, the reason he did that was because that's what Jesus taught him to do. Jesus was weak as well. The Bible is clear on that. The Bible says Jesus became a servant. He humbled himself. Jesus once said this. He said, when I am lifted up, that means on the day of my crucifixion, on the worst day of my life, on my most difficult day, I will draw all men to myself. Jesus said, when I am at my weakest, that's when most people are attracted to me. 1 Corinthians 13:34 says, Jesus was crucified in weakness. So I tell people that our weakness is what draws God's heart toward us and draws us to God. And to me, it's just one of the most important lessons we ever learn in grief is that our hard, difficult times are the very things that draw us to God. So that's week number 2. And at the end of the week of this lesson, I say, okay, guys, we're done with week number 2. Next week, we're going to talk about social grief. We're going to talk about doing grief among people. So then we get to week number 3. And I start out the week, as I do every week, where I review the last couple of weeks. I'll say, okay, good afternoon, everybody. It's good to see you guys. Today we're doing social grief. We reach out, friends, family, and grief. What we've done so far, and I review that we've talked about Jesus engaging grief, and we've talked about God's amazing heart of compassion for the griever. And then today we're talking about social grief. And so the idea of this lesson is, how do we do grief among people? And this is really important because you guys, church, as you know, it's a social environment. I mean, it is where we live our lives, right? I mean, I've been in the ICOC churches for 41 years. It is, it's my life. It's my best friends. It's people that came to my wedding. It's people that watch, our children grow up. It's people that I've cried with. It's people I've listened to their worst stories in life. They've listened to my stories. It's a social environment that we can't get away from, right? And so we talk about how do we do grief among people. And in this lesson, again, they've already read the chapter in the book. I'm just reviewing things for them. We talk about 2 different things that are really important. We talk about kind of a negative and a positive. The negative side is, how have people tried to fix your grief, right? And, people try to fix our grief by saying things to us. They say nothing, or you were lucky, you should be over this by now. Don't feel so bad about yourself, things like that, right? Have you ever had that happen in your life? People just say and I've said these things to people. I probably said every one of these things, and it's just what we do. We want to fix each other's grief, and we don't get to do that. That proverb, like one who takes away a garment on a cold day, or like pouring vinegar on a wound, is somebody who sings the songs to a heavy heart, right? That's exactly what he's talking about there. When we try to tell people positive things when their hearts are heavy, it hurts them. I've had people say things like, you were lucky, Tim, you had your mom for 50 years. That's pretty good. You know what? Intellectually, I guess that's correct, right? I feel fortunate that I had my mom for 50 years, but I could have lost her when she was 182 years old, and it would still hurt me terribly. So things like that just hurt us. We say those things to each other. And we usually say them with a good heart, but it hurts people. So we bring these kinds of things up. We talk about, oh, I know how you feel. I remember the day my dog died, things like that. Hey, don't worry, time heals all wounds. It's okay. Or we play theologian with people. Well, what God says is this and this, and don't worry, your loved one's in heaven, so quit crying. We do things like that, and they hurt people. So we talk about the idea behind grief is to do what Paul says, and it's one of the simplest phrases in the Bible: mourn with those who mourn. With other people, the best thing we can do is simply mourn with them. It's simply walking alongside the mourner. That's what we do. And so the first half of the devotional is devoted toward, these ideas that people have hurt you. And then the second half of the devotional is the opposite. How do we go out and find help for us as grievers? So we talk about the 4 friends that people need in grief. We have 4 different kinds of friends that I think we need to have in grief. We need the relator. We need to find somebody who's walked the path before we have. So when my mom died, I sought out brothers and sisters who had lost a parent, because I didn't know what it was like. Everything that they shared was brand new to me. Like, oh my gosh. This one time a brother said, yeah, I lost my mom 20 years ago. And then he said, he goes, the other day I was driving down the interstate and I just got overwhelmed with grief. I had to pull over to the side of the road and cry in my car. That was after 20 years. And I just thought, oh my gosh, I had no idea that losing my mom is going to impact me 20 years later. Every time I met somebody that had lost a parent, I learned from them. So we need a relator. We need a friend in grief. And what a friend does in grief is they don't do grief with you. In other words, after a big loss, sometimes it feels like our whole life is colored by grief. It's like every textural piece of our life is filled with grief. And so sometimes we got to go find a friend that'll just go out and, get a movie with us, or go get a cup of coffee and hang out, or go play Frisbee, or whatever you do up there in New York, right? You just need a friend to kind of help you just to live your life. I remember this one time, I was a school counselor for a long time. And, I had a student who lost, I don't know if he lost a parent or a sibling, I forget now, but I would visit him every day at school. Like, hey, how you doing? Can I help you? Can I talk to you? And one day he goes, Mr. Sumerlin, would you please leave me alone? And I'm like, oh my gosh, what did I do? And and I said, well, what's up? And he said, when I go home, it's all we do is grief. It's all we talk about. Everything in the home is grief. He said, when I come to school, I just want to be normal. Like, I just want to have homework and I want to listen to teachers talk. And then you keep interrupting my normal day with your questions about my grief. So that taught me a valuable lesson right there, is that in our grief, we often need somebody just to be normal with, keep our feet grounded a little bit more. Number 3, we all need a listener, right? We need somebody that'll listen to us. And we're not very good at this. I have a whole workshop called the Insights of a 12-year-old on how Jesus listened to people. So, but we need listeners, but we're not good at it as humans. So what I tell people is, you're probably going to have to ask somebody to listen to you. You're probably going to have to go up to somebody and say, hey, I'm having a hard day. My mom died a month ago. I'm having a really tough day. Would you listen to me? And I tell the story, there's been times in my life where I take people out to dinner and I'll just tell them, I'll say, I need someone to listen to me. If I take you out to dinner and buy you dinner, would you listen? And they're like, oh, sure, you bet. So I do. I take them out to dinner. I spend $20 on their dinner, and then I talk for 2 hours. And it's the cheapest therapy I've ever found. It is awesome. And so I tell people that story, like, you just got to find somebody and let them know that this time for me, is all about you listening. Please don't give me any advice. I just need someone to talk to. There's talking to people is actually therapeutic in nature itself. When we talk and somebody listens, you're performing therapy, by the way. So listening is a lost art in our country. And then finally, I remind people that oftentimes in grief, they need what we call a truth teller. They need somebody in their life that's going to remind them of the truth. Because in grief, oftentimes we can go sideways. We can get off base. We can get isolated, or we can go back to an old addiction that used to bring us comfort, things like that. And so I tell people, make sure you've got somebody in your life that's being a truth teller for you, somebody that's willing to kind of go beyond your pain and in a gentle, humble way, remind you of truth if you need it. So that's what this week number 3 is all about. And then we have a discussion question on those 2 topics. How have you been hurt? And what kind of person do you need to go find in your life? Where's the hole? Most of us have one of these that we're not accessing very well. And by the way, I get this 4 friends out of Mark chapter 2 with the 4 men that took the guy up on the roof and then lowered him in to see Jesus. He had 4 people help him. And the Bible actually says because of all of their faith, Jesus healed the man. And I just tell people, I remind people, it takes the faith of our friends sometimes for us to get better. So that's the 4 friends. That's week number 3. And then I conclude the week with sharing about how have you been harmed by what people say or don't say, and who do you need in your life? And people share. They get 10 minutes to share. They get 10 minutes of uninterrupted sharing time. And that's why our groups only have 8 at the max, because if you have more than 8, I said 8 to 10 before. Sometimes we've had up to 10, but even 10's a little bit cumbersome. 8's the magic number in my mind, 8 and below. Okay, that's week number 3. Then week 4, you're going to find that we're going to get very specific now. And in week 4, in week number 4, they're going to do a chapter on their history of grief in their life. Like, what has grief been like for them historically? And they do a chapter on personal grief. So it's actually 2 chapters for week number 4. When I rewrite the book, I'm going to condense that all into 1 chapter. But week number 4, we're going to start narrowing things down. Okay, so I start the week off and I say, hey, welcome to week number 4. We spent a week talking about Jesus engaging his grief. We talked about God and his heart of compassion. Last week, we talked about social grief and how we live grief among each other. Now, this week, we're going to talk about how do we individually do grief. So you can see kind of a narrowing here. And I do the devotional, and I remind people of what we studied that week in the chapter 4 and 5. In chapter 4, we've talked about the history of grief in our life. And there's actually a big chart that they work on in this one. It's really cool. And it's basically, how has grief discipled you in your life? So I always give them my example. You have your own examples, but when I was 10 years old, I had my favorite basset hound dog. His name was Heathcliff. And Heathcliff and I were buddies. We did a lot of stuff together. And he ran away one day. And that Sunday afternoon, my dad and I found him on the side of the road. He'd been hit by a car and died. So we brought Heathcliff home, 5 boys in the house. We buried him in the backyard. And then nobody said a word about it. Not a single word. So I learned in that time that you don't talk about grief. I just learned that as a 10-year-old boy, we don't talk about grief. We just don't do it. That's how grief discipled me as a young man. So we do that. We do that. And then we talk about our personal grief. And I share with them how grief can personally affect us mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, socially. I make points about each one of those. And that's all out of chapter 5. And then I make a point, guys. This one's really important here. This might be the most important point of the week, is I say, even though grief affects us all in some common ways, so there are commonalities to grief. Like most people have severe emotional reactions to grief. That's very common to have that. Many people have severe spiritual reactions in grief. While we have all those commonalities, we also all grieve as unique individuals. And there's two reasons for that, two major reasons. One reason is, and this is important because this is where we're heading toward. One reason we grieve individually in a unique way is that we have a unique relationship with the person that died. So here's an example. When I was a little guy, my Aunt Rosie died, who I'd never met. I had never heard a story about her. I had no context for that relationship. So when she passed away, I didn't feel anything. I had very little grief to go through. The only grief I had was my dad was really sad because that was it was actually my great aunt, so it was his aunt. So, but I didn't have a relationship, so I didn't grieve much. But then obviously on the other side of that is when my mom died, who I was with for 50 years, I had quite a bit of grief, right? So we grieve uniquely because we have a unique relationship with the person that we lost. And then the second reason we grieve uniquely is we're just all unique individuals anyways. So Fiona and Sarah and Angelo, they're just all going to grieve differently because they're all really, really different. They have different histories in life. They have different faiths. They're at a different point growing up right now. They have different circumstances. So that's why I remind people that, guys, that's why we don't do any mentoring or discipling in this group, because we all have a unique journey of grief. And we honor that for one another. We honor the fact that we all grieve uniquely. So at the end of this group, guys, here's what we do. We break into pairs. So I do a short devotional. We break into pairs. And we get to share for 30 minutes each on our personal grief and our history of grief with a partner. And you get 30 minutes of uninterrupted time to talk this through. People love this. Is one of the favorite parts of the group is they're like, I've never had 30 minutes of just pouring my heart out without somebody interrupting me. And next week we'll talk about the pairings, and we pretty much let the Holy Spirit determine how the pairings go, but I'll talk more about that later. But that's what we do. We don't have a group discussion per se. On this one, we just get together as couples and pairs, and we just share our life for 30 minutes, and then we switch, and the other person gets to share for 30 minutes, and you get to be a listener. And at the end of our pairings, we do get to get back together for a few moments, and we just process as a large group a little bit. My question when we process is, did anything surprise you? So people don't get in the big group and then rehash what they just did. Obviously, that wouldn't work. But we get in the big group, and I'll just say, did anything surprise you about this process? And people just share briefly, like, yeah, I was really surprised that whatever. So that's week number 4. And then week number 5, you're going to see things get very narrow. In week number 5, people read the chapter called This One Hurts the Most, Examining a Relationship. And in week number 5, what people in the group do is they take one relationship that hurts the most. They take that one person, usually it's why they came to group in the first place. They take the one person that hurts the most and they examine. They spend a week journaling about that relationship. And they write down the important events of that relationship. So what they're writing are things like, gosh, my mom came to my wedding. She paid for parts of my wedding. My mom, changed 6,000 diapers on me when I was a little guy. She was always, at my school events, things like that. And then we also write things like, my mom never liked the church I went to. And she kind of mocked it at times. She made fun of it as a fundamentalist church. And we never resolved that issue. My mom was kind of controlling. And that really bothered me that she would try to control my life even as an adult. Things like that, right? And so we come back in week number 5, and we've examined a relationship. We've honored that relationship by examining it. And guys, that's kind of a theme for the whole group, is the idea that we honor relationships, that we're spending time taking something that God feels is very important in our life, and we're making sense of it, we're honoring it. And in this week, week number 5, I always start off with, let's review the last 4 weeks now. Here's where we've been so far. And then this week, we're going to talk about the loved one that we lost. I do a short devotional on this, very short, like maybe 5 minutes. And then we break back into our pairs, and people get 30 minutes to talk about this relationship that they lost. And I have people say, Tim, there's no way I could talk straight for 30 minutes. And they always do. We almost never have enough time, because when you give people the heads up that you get to talk about your loved one for 30 minutes and you're uninterrupted, people will do it. And it's an amazing process, you guys, to just to sit and talk about this person who you lost. I mean, I just can't tell you. Some of you have already done this, so you know, but it's a wonderful way to honor somebody that you lost. And when I say honor, it's in a positive way, in the sense of, but it's also in a holistic way. This is what the relationship represented to me. Here's the essence of my relationship with my mom. Now, I warn people, do not get bogged down in details. Like, don't worry about, was it June or July of 1967 that this happened, or don't get bogged down in a lot of details. I tell people, I remind them, go for the essence of the relationship. Go for the essence. Go for the, what made up this relationship. So think in terms of the heart behind the relationship. Think in terms of the dynamics, how it impacted you, maybe how you impacted them, things like that. Those are the things, what I call the essence of a relationship. So again, we get in our pairings and we spend 30 minutes each, a whole hour, where the two of us get to share about our loved one. And it's uninterrupted time. Now, the person listening they're allowed to laugh and they're allowed to cry if it's appropriate, but they're not allowed to ask you questions or anything yet. They just are there to get you keep talking. At the end of your 2 30-minute times, if there's time left over, you can talk all you want and do whatever you want with that. And then certainly you can go get some Starbucks later on and talk about your loved one again, but in a conversation way. But during this pairing time, you get your 30 minutes of uninterrupted time. We come back together after that 1 hour of share time. We come back and I ask the same question. Did anything surprise you about this process? I had a guy once say, you know what? For most of my life after my dad died, I didn't like him. He was a mean, abusive man. And that's why I would never go to group for 20 years. Tim's been bugging me to go to this group for a long time. He said, after this week, I realized that my dad wasn't as bad as I thought he was. My dad came to a lot of my baseball games. And my dad actually helped me buy my first house. And it was really interesting to hear a comment like that. This particular week can sometimes really help people to get a more balanced view of the person that they lost. So that's the last, and then the last week, or week number 6, is kind of the culmination of the whole group. We are going to write a letter to our loved one in week number 6. And it's called a grief narrative. And guys, this is really important to understand what we do here. And I think the book's pretty clear on it, but I want to say something. In this letter, what we're doing is we're writing down the hurts, mostly the hurts that are in the relationship, that are unresolved. Here's my premise, even for this whole process, is that we don't grieve well because we have unresolved pain in the relationship. And we can't do anything about it anymore, right? We can't go apologize or we can't forgive. So what we do is in week number 6, people are going to identify the areas that they've hurt that loved one who died. And they're going to identify ways that their loved one hurt them. And this all came out in week number 5 anyways. When you examine a relationship, you're going to write down the hurts that are in there. And what we do in this letter, we do a couple things. We write a paragraph on how did your loved one make you laugh and love? Like what was it about them that made you love other people? What made you laugh because of the way they were? I talked about my mom's weird, quirky sense of humor. And then in the second paragraph, I'm going to write an apology to my loved one. And I'm going to apologize for the areas that I felt like I sinned against them in that we never resolved. Now, if we resolve something, then I don't write about that. But almost all relationships, there's something that just is unresolved. That was my fault. So with my mom, it's like, Mom, I was just disrespectful toward you in some ways that I never told you about. When I was a teenager, I gave you the finger behind your back and all my friends thought I was really funny, kind of thing. Things like that, like I stole money from my mom when I was a little kid so I can go buy candy with it. And I never told her I either forgot or whatever, or I was just too embarrassed and shameful. So I apologize for those things in the letter. I'm like, Mom, I'm really sorry that I did those things. That was just wrong. And then I also write a paragraph on forgiveness of what she did wrong to me. So there's areas, like I said before, where my mom felt like she thought I was in almost like a cult or like a fundamentalist church. She kind of made fun of it at times. And we never resolved it. We never sat down and just kind of hammered it out and resolved it and forgave each other. So I had to forgive her for that, right? And I'm of the opinion, who am I to not forgive somebody? After what I've been forgiven for in my life, who am I to say, I'm not going to forgive her for that? Of course I am. So I write a paragraph on forgiveness to my mom or whoever the loved one is. Now, let me say a caveat here for all you guys to remember this. There are situations where there have been serious abuse issues that the griever may not be ready to forgive their loved one for that. And we're not going to make you do it. We're not going to insist that you do that. You may need some more help going forward. Okay, so I warn people about that. There might be something in your life, and usually it centers around sexual abuse or emotional, physical abuse kind of thing, where they're just not at a place yet that they can forgive their loved one. And I say that that's fine. You do want to get there eventually for sure, right? Jesus is pretty clear about that. But maybe this isn't your time yet, but do the best you can. Maybe forgive them for other areas, and that'll help you forgive them. But anyways, I always give that caveat to people just in case it's out there. And then in this letter, you guys, what we do at the very end is we say goodbye to the hurts in the relationship. Now, we don't say goodbye to the relationship. Actually, far from it. You'll see in a moment. But we say goodbye to the hurts that exist. Paul once told the Philippians, he said, as far as it is possible, be at peace with one another. And that's the verse I use on this one. As far as it is possible for us, you guys, let's be at peace with each other. So this allowed me to be at peace with my mom. When I got done with this, there was nothing I could think of in our relationship that was bothering me. There's nothing that bothers me at all. If anything, with my mom now, I'm able to talk about it in a way that can help other people. But I have no hurts toward her at all. There is nothing but connection and love between my mom and me, even though we had a challenging relationship. Same with my dad. He was a Marine Corps pilot. I mean, golly, we had 5 boys in the family. It was a circus in our house. There's a lot of hurt going on, but there is nothing toward my dad that ever comes up in my heart that's bad, because I went through this process with him. So we get together week number 6. I start off, I review everything. I do a very short devotional, like 3 or 4 minutes on this process. We break up into our pairs again, and we read our letters to one another. And now this group only takes about 10 minutes or so, 10, 15 minutes. It doesn't take long to read a one-page letter. So we break up for like 10, 15, maybe 20 minutes at the most. And then we get back together and we get in a group again, the large group, and we process. And I ask the same question: did anything surprise you about this letter writing? And we do kind of a brief debrief time. And then I finish up our groups with a final devotional. And this devotional is called Enduring Relationships, Finding Solace and Joy. And what we do in this week is we talk about the biblical idea of memorial and living stones. We talk about God's idea and God's plan that we have an ongoing relationship with the person that we lost. Now, guys, this is very innovative, by the way. I've done grief for 30 plus years professionally. And in the grief industry, the basic idea at the end of grief is you got to accept it and move forward, move on. And it just didn't feel right to me with my mom. I was like, how do I just accept it and move on? Like, what's that mean? I don't know what that means. She's such a big influence in my life. So what I did, I started reading my Bible, and I stumbled. I don't know how I got there, but I got in Exodus 24, 25, 26. And I read this story about God with the Israelites and how he had them set up these memorial stones. And he'd say, put a pile of rocks next to the river. And every time you walk past that pile of rocks, think about the sons of Israel, people that have already died. I'm like, those people already died. Huh. And then he told Aaron this one time, he said, Aaron was like the priest. He said, Aaron, before you go into the Holy of Holies to advocate for the people, I want you to put on a jacket, a coat, a garment. And on that garment, I want you to put stones on it. And on those stones, I want you to write down the 12 tribes of Israel. And he said, I want you to put those things over your heart whenever you make decisions for people. And I'm like, oh my gosh. God's telling his priests that whenever you make a decision for somebody, you are to go backwards in time and think about those people that have already died. We do it all the time in the United States. It's called Washington, D.C. You ever go to Washington, D.C.? What do you see there? You see these massive memorial buildings, monuments to old people who have already died. What's the purpose of those things? It's to draw us backwards into what made those people important, right? You go to the Lincoln Memorial. Have anybody ever been there? It's amazing. You walk up these stairs and you go in there, and there's Abe sitting in this great big throne. And then on either side of Abe are his 2 inauguration speeches engraved in stone. And I stand there and read those every time. I read all the way through each one. And I get inspired, like, okay, the guy wasn't perfect. I understand that. But in his context, in his era, he was amazing. And so we get inspired to be different because of what other people have already done in our lives. So we talk about having an ongoing relationship with the person who died. And what we do at the very end of this, we talk about memorials and we talk about rituals. And this is cool. You guys see my slide there? There's a picture of my mom and dad. Those are their ashes. That's my mom's oboe that she had in high school back in the 30s. And that's a painting I actually did. I don't know how I did that painting because I'm not very artistic. I think some lady helped me in Cub Scouts make that painting. She was very artistic. But anyways, I've always liked it. So that's my memorial to my mom and dad. It sits on the piano in our home. We ask people, find a place in your home to build some kind of memorial, some kind of physical attribute to the person you lost. Oftentimes people will take a book, lay a book on its back, and then put a picture of their loved one on top of the book. That's their memorial. Erica Kim buys a huge bouquet of flowers every year on the anniversary of her mom's passing, and she puts it on the piano. I asked them, find something in your life that makes you remember your loved one in a physical way. And then the second thing is do a ritual. Now, rituals are something you do periodically. You do it every month, you do it once a year, you do it every week, every day, whatever. A ritual is something you do periodically. Now, at this point, people get a little bit uncomfortable, like, Tim, you sound like you're a cult member or something. And I say, wait a minute, let me remind you guys of something. We do a memorial and a ritual every Sunday at church. What's it called? It's called communion. And we do a memorial. Jesus says, do this in remembrance of me. And we do a piece of bread and a cracker, and we do a little cup of wine or cup of juice. We do it every single Sunday. And it's an important part of our faith. I said, this is the same thing. We do something that reminds us of somebody that was very important in our life. So let me give you an example. I told you what my memorial looks like. You can see it on the slide there. It's really important to me, you guys. It's something that it's a mainstay of our home. If our home ever caught on fire, outside of getting the kids and the dog out of the house, and my wife, of course, I'd grab these artifacts real quick. These are probably very few things I have that are more important. So that's a memorial. And people, we have sharing about it. People come up with ideas. Here's what I want to do. But then we also do rituals. We do something to remind us. And here's the example. Did I tell you guys about this on Wednesday night about my dad, rum and cokes? I think I did, right? Yeah. So that's a ritual for us with my dad. We do it every single New Year's Day. And excuse me, and it's just really important. My wife has one. Her mom died like 5 or 6 years ago. Her mom loved Walmart. When her mom would travel, she would stop in a local Walmart just to walk around and buy something. She just loved these Walmart stores. And she would be so friendly with people. She'd always stop strangers in the aisle, like, hey, I'm from Indiana, And so my wife, on the anniversary of the day her mom passed away, goes to Walmart. And she just goes out to Walmart and gets super friendly with people. That's her ritual. She does it every single year. And it's just something that really brings back to my wife, her mom. My ritual with her mom is when we cleaned out her house, she had this really cool broom, like one of those old straw brooms. And I use that in the garage now for the last 7 years or so. And every time I use that broom, I think about Leanna Chappell. I think about what a great lady she was. So those are memorials and rituals. Oftentimes, guys, what we do now that the virus is over with, we'll get back to it, but we do this in somebody's home this final week, and we do a big dinner. So I'll say, hey guys, we're going to meet at my home, or we're going to meet at somebody else's home. I'll tell them I'm going to bring the main course. I do some kind of chicken something or other. And I just have everybody bring like drinks and side dishes. We have a big dinner, and then we do this final devotional thing. And it's a real exclamation point. It's a real foundation for what we've just been doing. And it really bonds us in a great way. So that's my devotional for today. I'm going to remind you of a couple things, and then I'll get to your questions. So one of the things is people all need to have a book to come to this group, okay? So I tell them right away when we announce the group, like, hey, make sure you get a book. You can't really do the group without it because of the way it works. You can go to my website to buy the book, inmotioncounseling.org. You can buy them in bulk from me as well if you're running groups in your church and you want to just go ahead and buy a box of them, and then you can sell them for whatever. Some people sell them for more than they cost them, and that way they have money to bring like maybe drinks or something to the group or whatever you want to do. But I leave that up to you guys. So let me go ahead and stop my sharing. And it's 9:16. Wow. And I'm going to go to the chat room now and start grabbing some questions, okay? Okay, so somebody asked me about the interview question. So it's not a formal interview at all. So I'll get up at church, say, hey guys, we're going to start a new grief journey group. We're going to start it on this date. And usually it's about 3 weeks in advance. And I'll say, if you're interested, please come see me. So in fellowship, I make myself super available that day. And when people come up, all I ask them is one question: who did you lose? Like what happened? And they tell me their story really quick. And I just want to make sure it's appropriate. So sometimes people come up and say, yeah, I lost my job, or my dog died and I feel really bad. What I do with people that didn't lose a loved one is I'll tell them, your loss is really important and I want to support you in that loss, but this group probably is not appropriate for that loss, because you lost your job, which is really hard, but you're going to be sitting next to a sister who lost their mom yesterday, kind of thing. And it just doesn't work well. Just let you know. And then I just find out, are there ways I can support you with your dog dying or whatever, because those are important losses, but they're just not appropriate for the group. And then the other question, sometimes I say, would it be better for you to meet before church or after church? Because we always have the option, one or the other, or, whatever the options are, sometimes we have a choice. And then I get a feel for it. That's all I do. And then I get their email address. And once I get 8 people that are verified, they want to come, I send out the first email. And I usually attach the introduction in chapter 1, which I'm going to do right now. I'm going to attach it to the chat room. So it's a PDF of introduction in chapter 1. And that way they can get started before the group gets going, before they buy their book, I'm sorry. Let's see, where is it? Introduction in chapter 1. There it is. Okay, I've just attached introduction in chapter 1. So that introductory email I send out to all the people that said yes, I'm going to attach this this introduction in chapter 1 PDF, which you're allowed to use. And then that way, as they order the book, they can get started by just using the PDF. All right. So good question. Thank you for answering that. Okay. I think that's what people have been saying about the pandemic, that we weren't producing time of quarantine, yet so many have learned so much about God. Isn't that the truth, right? That people really kind of have been able to stand back a little bit. And it's been so good for our churches, guys. I think in the years to come, in some ways, we're going to say, wow, that was a real time of renewal for my faith, or a time that I examine my faith, right? Tell me which scripture where Jesus is weak. It's 1 Corinthians 13:34. The Bible says Jesus was crucified in weakness. And then Philippians 2 talks about Jesus humbled himself. He became a man. Jesus, what's the other one? He says, I have nowhere to lay my head. Jesus says he became nothing, or he became poor so we could be rich. Those are all signs of weakness. They're all things that Jesus, and the amazing thing about Jesus is he did them to himself. Like, he decided. And that's the biggest difference I want to mention, is that you and I, we're weak because we're weak. We're just humans and we're weak. Jesus, on the other hand, had to make a decision to be weak. So he decided weakness. He wasn't weak inherently, but he decided to become weak. He decided to take on a weak posture to help people. Here's somebody that said, I had to do that. Yeah, I'm so sorry. You had to pull off the road and just bawl your eyes out. Yeah. And I hope that's helpful to you when you do that. It helps me when the Spirit puts that on my heart. Okay, so 1 Corinthians 13:34. What do you do with someone who is mourning multiple deaths? So that's really a good question, because that often happens when people come in that first week. They'll say, yeah, I'm here because of, they'll list like 3 or 4 losses. I always ask them, would you just try to go ahead and find one that you could talk about, and go ahead and find the most difficult one? And here's the premise is if we focus on the most difficult one, then it really helps us go forward with any other ones that we got in our life. If we can tackle the one that's most challenging in a group environment, then we could do other losses much more effectively. Now, what happens is sometimes people kind of balk on that. They don't want to do that. And I gently try to guide them in that way. They don't have to really land on somebody until week number 5 when they examine a relationship. So up until then, there's some people that just aren't sure yet. By week number 5, though, I have to kind of like guide them into that. And sometimes I'll sit with a couple or a brother or sister. I'll sit with them after group 4, and they'll say, I don't know which one to do. And I just guide them. And, obviously it's up to them eventually to figure out what they're going to do. But I try to guide them into finding the one that's most problematic. Which one comes up in your heart most often? Which one is most painful? Which one are you most unsettled with? And then that's kind of hopefully where they go. How is week number 4 and 5 peer sharing different? Can you say more? So week number 4 is personal grief. So week number 4, you're with your partner and you're talking about your history of grief and your personal grief in week number 4. In week number 5, you're examining one relationship that you lost, and that's what you share about. So I hope that clarifies that. At my home, my son buys a birthday cake on my husband's birthday. Oh, we sing happy birthday to him. Daisy, that's just, yeah, that really touches my heart in a big way. I hope you don't mind, but I might use that. And I won't use your name, but I might remember that as a future example. What an interesting ritual to do. I got to pull myself together for a second here. That was really cool. Okay. Okay, are they paired with the same person each week? Yeah, they typically are. Now, I'll do a real quick thing on pairings. I'll remind you next week. On the pairings, typically what happens is in the first week or two, after I've mentioned it a few times, people have already kind of decided who they're going to pair up with. They usually have a buddy in the group, like they're friends already or whatever. So usually it's not too big a deal. People have already figured it out. There's a couple things I try to do. One is I ask married couples to not be pairs. I just feel like married couples typically get so much time to process already that it's pretty helpful to find somebody that might just have some new eyes on you that might be kind of helpful for you. And maybe you can be a little more honest than you might be with your spouse. So we typically discourage spouses from doing that. The second thing is typically people get in a pair with the same gender, but I don't make a big deal out of that either. And here's why. You're not really interacting that much in the pairings. It's not like you're like having these long, deep conversations. Really what you're doing is you got another human being that's listening to you. And so I don't really care, honestly, if it's a man and a woman. Some cultures are pretty, like the African culture is really strong about that. They don't think it's right. So I just tell whatever your church does, that's fine. I had a situation a couple of groups ago where we had a woman in her 60s and a teenage boy that was about 19 or something. And it just worked out that they were partners. And it was awesome. At first I thought, oh my gosh, that's not going to be good. And they became like really good buddies. They were so good for each other. She was like the matronly, motherly person. And he's this young zealot kind of kid. And they were like buddies and they did their thing together. So I've just learned over the years that it's not that big a deal. We certainly don't want to like force people into it. I would say the only time in that way to be careful, like obviously if you got like young baby Christians that are singles, maybe steer them away from each other, right? They just may not have the maturity and all of a sudden they're goofy with each other or something. But, that may not be healthy to have like young Christians that are of opposite sex or whatever. But But usually the Spirit, he just kind of works things out for us. So we let him guide us in a lot of ways. Can someone do the group more than once? Yeah, that woman I just told you about actually came twice. She came once for her brother, I think, and then her mom. And that's fine. Typically people don't, because once they do it one time, they can kind of process on their own the next time or just with a friend. But I have no problem with people coming twice. They're kind of good. They're like veterans a little bit, and they can be like shepherds for you a little bit. Is a book available in Spanish? Yes, it is. It's available in Spanish, and yeah, I had a brother do it for free for me out in LA. One of the elders out there translated the whole thing. It's pretty cool. So it is available in Spanish. Can I leave the group if I haven't lost a person that I'm still grieving? I've had people die in my life, but they were not so significant that they left a huge hole or scar. I came to the train to help others, but I'm afraid I might not have significant stories to tell to relate to. Suzanne, thank you for your directness there and your honesty. I appreciate that. So here's a couple thoughts. First of all, you guys, I tell a lot of stories because I'm doing a training for a big group. I don't tell a ton of my stories when I facilitate groups. There's just not a need for it. So don't worry about that part of it. I do have people that do the groups and they do them for themselves also. I've done that before. When my dad died, I did a group and I was also grieving the loss of him. It's a bit challenging. What I would do is I would take one of your losses that is most problematic to you. It doesn't have to leave a huge hole, but something that was difficult. And I'd go ahead and process that loss when you do your first group. With that loss, what I would do, I tell people, if you're going to process your own loss, I would stay at least 1 week ahead of the group. So in other words, I would lead the group. I would process a loss. I would have somebody on the sidelines that I can do the group or that I can do the chapters 1 week in advance with. So that when I'm leading the group, I've already kind of processed that chapter for them. I've done it on my own with somebody else. So if I'm doing group number 2 with the whole group, I've already done group 2 work with some friend of mine. And so I'm not quite so emotionally like right there with it. Okay. So it's a little challenging, but you can do it. The other thing I've seen churches do, I did this for the Nairobi sisters, 6 sisters in the Nairobi church a while back. They wanted to be trained. So I trained them all 6 of them. And then at the end of it, they're all like, we're not ready, Tim. We are all having our own grief issues. So I just did a group for them alone. I said, all right, I'll do your group and then you guys can go off. And now they're off doing groups. Sometimes what people do in churches is they'll take 5 or 6 people from this meeting and say, let's do our own group together. I know you guys well. So they'll do their own grief group and then they're kind of ready to go. Does that make sense? So I hope that's good. How do you know when a person is ready for group to be able to go through all 6 classes? So the industry standard in grief is 6 months. It's what they say. So you guys know when you lose somebody significant, I mean, at least the first month or so, you're just in a fog, right? I mean, after my mom died, those first 2 months were just, I'm just learning how to breathe again, right? So I tell people that. At the same time, I'm never going to hold somebody to 6 months. I tell them if it's been recent, I tell them, here's what the group looks like. Here's what you're going to be doing. And here's what it might be like for you if it's a recent loss. And, that couple I told you whose son committed suicide, they came to group like 2 months after the suicide. And I sat them both down. I said, guys, this is really early. Are you sure? And I told them what group's going to look like. And they're like, yep, the Spirit has told us we should go. So we're going. And they came in, guys, and it was good. It was challenging. But so I would say, I would wait at least 1 month. I just feel like 1 month is minimum after a loss to come to group. And that's why we do 2 groups a year, because we want to capture people that need it. Do they pair up with the same people? Yes, they do. And, they don't have to, as far as like, if somebody's absent that week or something. Those last couple of weeks are kind of interesting, because if somebody does miss the group, they can always backfill that in during the week. So if somebody has to miss a Sunday group, then I just tell them, in the next 5 or 6 days, find somebody to talk to and do your 30 minutes with them outside a group. Then when they come the next week, they're all good to go. It says here, my cousin who is more like a brother, my father died a month apart. Would it be okay for me to grieve my cousin and my father at the same time? So we've never done that before until recently. There was a man, and he's fine with me talking about this. One of the brothers in the Colorado Springs church lost his 2 boys to fentanyl overdose on the same day. They were 19 and 20 years old, and they both got a hold of some bad. They thought they were taking Oxycontin, and it was laced with fentanyl. They both died overnight. He came in and did both boys. And I told him, I said, I don't know, Matt, that's hard. And I told him why. And I said, no one's ever done that before. And he said, well, I want to try it. So I said, let's do it. I think there's some real unique challenges. It's really hard, okay? And my advice to you is to not do that. My advice is to stay with the one that's most problematic. And then after group, go ahead and tackle the next one. Because the next one you can do by yourself or with a friend of yours. You don't have to go through group for the next grief in your life. So I'd go ahead and take your dad, probably. That seems to be, but you have to decide. What do you do when you don't have enough people to pair them with? Oh, that's a good question. Then I just jump in as a group leader or group facilitator, and I'm the pair for the person. So I either get an hour off and I get to go do some work, or I'm going to sit and listen to somebody. It's kind of nice, because then that person has a full hour with me. So what I do is I'll listen to them for 30 minutes or so, and then we just talk. We just have an exchange of ideas, and they can ask me questions. I can share with them my story. So anyways, it works pretty well. So you may listen to somebody, or you may have an hour to go get some coffee or something. In pairing, could there be dangers of becoming emotionally attached? Yeah, that's why I say I'd be careful with, like young, immature people, or, even maybe with a husband, wife of different marriages or something, may not be the best thing. So just be aware of it. Yeah. It's our nature to teach correct. How do you handle someone in the group if they start correcting somebody? Right. And that certainly happens every now and then. I just gently remind the group, like, hey guys, let's remember one of our guidelines was that we don't interrupt. We want to give everybody a free, open experience to share their life. So let's just be good listeners, okay? And I try not to call the person out, for sure, because that's the other problem. If you call somebody out, then everybody else is like, uh-oh, I hope he doesn't call me out. So we want to be careful and gentle with that. It's the same thing when people are going on and on and on. Sometimes people are just unaware of, like, I've already talked for 20 minutes kind of thing, when they're only supposed to get 10 minutes. And so what I do, and I'll do this next week, but I've got techniques in order to help people stop talking. And the best technique you can do is when somebody's talking and they've gone on too long, excuse me, when they take a breath, when they breathe, then you interrupt them, right? Then you go, oh, thank you so much, Nicole, for your sharing. Hey, we want to give everybody else a chance to talk. Fiona, would you go ahead and go now? And it's just kind of a gentle way of interrupting somebody, because if you don't do it, man, they can go on for 30 minutes sometimes, and it's not a good dynamic. People get really mad at them and stuff. So be careful of that. Usually if they go past 10 minutes, I'm pretty aware, and I'm looking for ways to interrupt. If they sit next to you, you can do the same thing when they breathe by putting your hand on their shoulder and then interrupting them at that moment. Okay, what happens when people don't do the readings? Every now and then that's happened. Somebody they eventually kind of fess up. They go, yeah, I'm not doing very good in this group. And I just tell them, I say, you know, you got a choice. You can either catch up if you want and get on it, or you can just come to the next time we do it. Sometimes people just aren't ready for it. And usually they're pretty open and honest. And there might be people that didn't do readings I never even knew about. That's their call. I mean, they're the ones that are missing out. So there's no accountability or anything like that. It's just, I'd say by and large, everybody that comes to these groups wants to be there. Nobody's making you come. Nobody's holding you accountable to it. They just want to be there. So they're going to do the work. What do you do when half the group starts missing group? That's never happened to me before. Yeah, again, people that come to this thing, they want to come because, yeah. So that just has never happened. I guess if that happened, you would need to sit down and say, okay, guys, we need to shift gears or something, or we just need to pull the group into a smaller group. I don't know. Can you do the group at 2 people? Yes, you can. You bet. You can do this with one other person and say, let's get on the phone every week and process together, or let's meet at Starbucks and process, or let's meet at our homes and do this together. You can do it 2 people, 3 people, 4 people. I built the book in a way that it can reach out to any number of people. How do you handle it when someone goes through group classes 1 through 5 and then find they aren't ready to go through group class 6 in writing the letter? I've never had that happen before. So I've had one guy that came up to me after like the 4th week, and he's kind of a younger guy. He goes, yeah, I'm just too mad at God to do any more of this work. His mom had died unexpectedly. He wasn't a Christian, but he grew up in the church. He goes, I'm just too mad. And I just told him, I said, I totally get it. I'm really sorry. You're always welcome to come back. Let me know how I can help you out here, okay? I think that's the only time that's ever happened in all my years. If somebody quits coming, they usually quit coming after about the 2nd week. Because it's kind of hard to fake this stuff, right? You got people in a circle crying and stuff, and you're like, I don't even know what they're talking about. I didn't do any of the reading this week. So they usually come up and they just say, yeah, I'm not going to come back. And that's fine. In fellowship, is it ever wise to ask a griever the details of someone's death if they're not in the person's inner circle early in the loss? I think it's appropriate if you're willing to give them the time and space to do it. So I do a lot of this kind of work. People know me as the grieving guy or whatever, and I'm also an elder, so people expect me to kind of like do that. So I have no problem with somebody I don't know. But if I do it, I always try to at least pull them off to the side somewhere, away from all the hubbub of fellowship. And I try to give them at least, some time to sit down. If I can't give them that, then I tell them, can we meet at another time? Or I talk to them about who else do you have that could do this with you? I don't think it's fair for me to stand in fellowship, ask somebody, hey, how are you doing with your mom dying? And then I'm all distracted and, hey, Tim, I got to talk to you about something, all that kind of stuff. I don't think that's fair to the griever. So I always try to pull them off to the side. But I think it's appropriate. I think it's definitely appropriate, like at work with people that aren't Christians and stuff. You probably the only person that's ever done that with them. Say, hey, I'd like to know more about your dad. Can we get lunch together and you can tell me about your dad? I think that's super appropriate, you guys. I think it's a wonderful way to share your faith and share the gospel with people. It's a wonderful way just to simply reach out and be a friend to somebody. Do you recommend the group meet every week consecutively or every 2 weeks? We traditionally meet every week. There is there's research that indicates the pattern and the how often a group meets that is correlated with how effective it is. There are also times where we don't meet. So we don't meet on Mother's Day. We'll skip that week. We don't meet on Easter Sunday. We'll skip that week. There are times that we skip a week because I feel like the group needs some time to catch up. For whatever reason, somebody or 2 or 3 people in the group say, man, I'm just not catching up with everything. So I say, let's take a week off and then come back if the group has a consensus on that. So I just do whatever is going to work best for the group. As a pattern, though, every other week, unless you're in an environment where that's kind of normal, like maybe like New York City, and it's impossible to meet every week because things are so scattered, maybe that would indicate every other week. Try it out and let me know how it works out. Is it insensitive to have a timer to keep people sharing in sessions? That's pretty cool. I would only do that if it was like super problematic, and people were rebelling or something. This doesn't happen very often, guys, that people go over their time. I think if you just happen to have a group of real chatty people, and your little interruption things don't help much. People are like blowing you off and like, I'm just going to keep talking. Then yeah, maybe a timer would be appropriate. Somebody's phone that beeps quietly or something like, oh, time's up. But I don't want to put that kind of pressure on people. Like I want it to be organic and authentic as possible. So I wouldn't do that. But if you try it, let me know. My friend just wasn't ready, encouraged to go to group 2 months after their spouse died. When it came to writing the letter, they were not ready to write the letter. Yeah, I totally get that. That person, I would try to get some time and just ask questions like, how are you doing? And what else is going on? What was most difficult about the letter? You guys, the thing about the letter is you're saying goodbye to hurt. So most people, when I go to a doctor, that's what I'm trying to get the doctor to do for me, is say goodbye to my body hurts. And so most people are very eager to write that letter. So that might be where, like, gosh, was there abuse or something in the relationship that's really hard to talk about? It may indicate like private counseling is necessary. Like maybe this is the kind of thing that this group just doesn't touch the way it should. And you need a professional to come in. I don't know. It'd be a really interesting conversation. Or it might just be like, they got to week number 6 and you got the flu, or we're moving homes and all of a sudden I just can't handle this, or work has gone chaotic lately. Then you could just say, all right, why don't you take a week or 2 off and then write your letter, and then you and I could sit down and do your letter together. Something like that. Just see what the holdup is. And do you recommend to have 2 group facilitators? Good end question here. We'll talk about that next week. There's pros and cons to it. It could be really good to have 2 facilitators doing a group, and it can also be a bit challenging because there's more coordination that has to happen. And the group can be a little bit, like we're doing that right now. I'm doing online groups right now, and we're trading off facilitators. And I'm curious to see how it goes, because we had our first group last week and I led it. And then next week, a woman from San Antonio is going to lead it. And I just, I'm going to be curious on how the group kind of responds to 2 different people. And by the way, I'll just say this and probably re-say it next week. I have no problem with women leading these groups, mixed groups, no problem at all. I tell church leaders, please don't. I have a church that wouldn't do groups because they couldn't get any men to lead them, but they had women all over the place wanting to do them. And I'm like, guys, please don't do that to the griever. If the griever needs help, a woman is, if not more qualified than men to lead these things, please let them do it. I just think it's not good. That's a very outdated approach to women and men and all that stuff. And so we have no problem with women we've always had women lead these groups. Again, if your church is like super adamant, then I'm not going to argue with them, but there's nothing about this group that you're doing something unbiblical by facilitating a conversation. All right. So, and if your leader has a problem with it, please get them to get a hold of me. As an eldership group, we just got through dealing with this for 2 years of gender roles in churches. And we have women that do communion by themselves. They don't have some guy standing behind them over their shoulder watching them. We have women that preach with their husbands. They co-preach, and that's fine. We have women do the welcome. We have women lead the worship service. We believe it's very biblical. So have them talk to me. I'll share what I know. So anyways, you didn't ask me that question, but I get started. So that's it for questions. You guys are awesome. Thank you for putting up with me for almost 2 hours now.